And welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday edition of the Just Parlays show here at the Max Wagers Network. I am your new co-host, Scott Reichel, and joining me, of course, since it is a parlay show, is the parlay expert, Chris King. And joining us two is a man who's here because he has a lot of fun hanging out with us for some reason.
That's right.
It's Jim Williams. How you guys doing today?
We're doing well. I'm doing well. I can't speak for Chris, so I'll let him speak for himself.
Well, Jim spoke for himself, so Chris, how you doing?
It's another day in the neighborhood. Like you said, another week, another new co-host. I'm starting to feel like you guys are the red shirt guys on Star Trek.
I'm hoping I didn't do that badly of a job. I can handle being the second worst co-host you've ever had, but the worst, I mean, that's where I draw the line, So if you ain't first or last,
who are you putting at the bottom of the list?
I don't know. I'm asking you. I'm saying as long as that intro was good enough, I can live with it.
It's a low bar to jump sometimes.
It's Scott Reichel versus the field at this point.
Pretty much. But we'll see. We'll see either way.
Vegas has the field at plus 130.
I'm assuming you guys are thrilled about the actual sports card today because there's a lot to talk about. Not really, but I mean, is less than yesterday because yesterday, of course, was the home run derby. Right. I said I like Soto for the value at about 6-1. He ended up winning. Did anything really surprise you about the home run derby? Did you like it? Any takeaways?
I think they didn't need to take 45 minutes to explain the rules of what a home run derby is.
Well, it seems like
anybody that watched the old home run derby show that they used to have in the 60s and stuff, where you'd have Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle, all those guys know what a home run derby is. It's not that complicated. You hit the ball over the fence or you don't.
Are you a fan of the time pressure now, or do you personally like it when they used to take 40 pitches and it would take about an hour per batter?
Jim?
I like the time factor because it does force you to, it forces you to not, I mean, they'd be there all night if they could take pitches. So I do that. I do also like, though, if you hit the ball over, was it 440?
Twice.
You get in, twice you get a minute added to your time. So that certainly helps. And
I'm still old school. I'd rather have it go back to, like I said, the old TV show where you had 3 outs per inning. And if, you didn't hit it over the fence, it was an out. There you go.
Okay, trivia. Do you know where that show was filmed?
I thought it was filmed at somewhere in Hollywood because I thought they didn't actually film it at an actual park.
No, it was actually Wrigley Field in Los Angeles. There was a Wrigley Field in Los Angeles. That was the home of the Los Angeles Stars of the Pacific Coast League. And when they got rid of the stadium, it is now the CBS Broadcast Center, which is where it has been for many, many years, back where all of those Carol Burnett and all those big shows were done, All in the Family.
I just warned that Chicago ripped off Wrigley Field from Los Angeles. That was my main takeaway from that.
Well, Mr. Wrigley had money all over the place, but the Wrigley Mansion is actually in Pasadena. So
cool. I can't say that I knew.
For those of you who care about total trivia, that is about as
you could have taken that park and just put it in my backyard. Then I could have, I wouldn't have to build one.
Speaking of trivia, though, I did see something I haven't seen before yesterday. I saw a tiebreaker round in Jeopardy.
Oh, okay.
I'd never seen that before in my life, but apparently they used the Family Feud method. Whoever buzzed in first and answered correctly won. Didn't know that was a thing, but I saw that yesterday, so I found that intriguing. But I know the bookmakers cleaned up on the matchups because Pujols won against Schwarber. There was some controversy involved based on maybe a miscalculation. It seemed like Schwarber might have tied him, and they didn't count it, and instead it went to a swing-off or whatever you want to call it, and Pujols ended up winning. Schwarber, I believe, needed one more home run the final 30 seconds of extra time in order to actually beat him. He didn't do it. And Pujols, J.C. Stone mentioned, if you had the under 18 or 18 and a half for the total home runs in the Derby, that was easily the worst beat that you could have had because he ended up with 13, and somehow Schwarber, who was a minus 400 favorite basically, just could not beat 13 with an extra 30 seconds to work with. No. And it ended up resulting in extra time, and Pujols ended up winning. Soto won the whole thing, though. I feel like it was a fun competition. Julio Rodriguez put on a show, and then I guess he ran out of gas a little bit at the end. Any thoughts on Alonso doing workout sets in between home run derby swings?
I don't know what he's thinking. I think that he said he liked to go first, and in the first two where he won, he did go first.
Mm.
And I think it's always if you're number two, you tend to push, and that doesn't work well. And for some reason, Pete, and I noticed this a lot, you guys probably did as well, Pete was swinging at pitches that there was no way in hell he was going to hit out of the ballpark.
Yeah,
he looked like Javier Baez chasing
Right.
last night.
Well, that's the issue with the time pressured format, though,
Right.
because you can't really afford to take that many pitches, which kind of made me
Right.
laugh in the first round. Because Pujols, I swear, took like 3 pitches right down the middle in the first round. We saw Acuna swing and a miss at 1. We saw Julio Rodriguez swing and a miss at 1. When you're time pressured, even if they're bad pitches, you're going to waste the same amount of time if you don't swing. So you're kind of forced to swing at everything. But yeah, any other takeaways you guys had? Because I feel like the actual event was pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
I think it would have helped if they would have had guys that threw more strikes.
That's true. Definitely true. Even Rodriguez's pitcher wasn't great. Soto's pitcher was okay, and he still won the whole damn thing. But props to him. Nice cash if you ended up having it. I made a very nice chunk of change with Pujols' longest homer under 459.5. I believe he never reached 440 in the competition.
Closing at?
Closed at 451.5.
Oh, so that's where it ended up closing. Okay.
It closed there.
What it went down to?
It wasn't close, but there was some controversy because according to random Twitter sources, and I believe DraftKings initially, they had one listed at 470. Under no circumstance did Pujols even reach it to 440.
No.
So DraftKings
it bounced and rolled about six miles.
I was going to say, so that was the only controversy, but DraftKings graded the under a winner, and it appears that the under was definitely the winner. So I made a nice chunk of change there. Good. You guys have any bets on it?
No, I was. I thought Alonso was going to win, but that's what they print menus, right? They play the game.
And Rye says the new home run derby format sucks.
Well, Rye's just biased that Schwarber, stunk on a free layup in round 1, right? Right, Rye? But
how do you...
Tim Earl taking the National League on the money line and the run line tonight, despite the fact that, the American League's won, 8 in a row?
It feels like 30.
And a pitcher to strike out the side.
Okay.
Which pitcher's gonna strike out the side?
Does it have to be the same pitcher, or can you pull a pitcher mid-inning and still strike out their other batters?
I don't know. It says pitcher. It doesn't say parentheses. It doesn't say, plural. So,
yeah.
And my biggest concern about the All-Star game too is now you just stiffed Alcantara from being the starter in the All-Star game because it's in Los Angeles. So let's start Clayton Kershaw, who, let's face it, was good 4 or 5 years ago.
I mean, he's been good this
year. He could be a starter then. He's not, but he's been injured too.
He's been injured, but of course he did have the 2 perfect games, 7+ innings. So he has had some good numbers. Alcantara should be starting. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Realistically, the favorite in the Cy Young races, unless they pitched on Sunday, should be starting the All-Star game.
Normally they do, yeah.
I agree with that point. However, I do think that Kershaw should be an all-star. I just think he shouldn't be starting. But
I'm not saying he shouldn't be an all-star. I'm just saying he shouldn't be on the mound. You look at Alcantara since May 11th. The guy has made 13 starts and hasn't gone less than 7 innings in any of them.
Yeah, he's Bob.
He's given up 3 homers in 102 2/3 innings.
You go through the numbers.
Hit 17 walks.
He's basically Bob Gibson. If you want to go through the numbers in the last couple of months, but I think the one thing that really annoyed me, even though I have no real rooting interest in the White Sox, I have no idea how Dylan Cease is not an all-star. I don't know what you're really looking for.
He walks too many guys.
I guess. I mean, he's leading the league in strikeouts. His numbers are very good. I know that he ended up pitching recently, so they ended up not including him. They put Hendricks on instead. You couldn't at least give the spot to Cease and let him forfeit it because he couldn't actually participate. Like, I don't know how Cease is not an all-star. That's absolutely absurd to me.
Yeah, he leads the league in strikeouts. He also leads the league in walks.
Yeah, but what's his ERA and everything else?
True, but you also have to take into consideration his ERA is 2.15, but he's also given up 10 unearned runs.
Just saying, though. You have a 2.15 ERA, you're leading the league in strikeouts. You should be an all-star.
I think the reason that Kershaw's starting is because obviously it's in Los Angeles and they want to give him a bit of a curtain call. I don't think he's going to pitch more than an inning.
They're all only going to pitch about an inning or so. So it especially doesn't matter because whether you liked it counting for home field advantage in the World Series or whether you thought it was
in
stupid.
the old days, yeah.
Yeah, the point is it doesn't matter anymore. So now it's a full-on exhibition, and it doesn't matter which pitchers perform well, and the managers, hell, they could even throw out position players if they really wanted to. It doesn't matter.
Right.
But did you actually like it when it used to mean something, or do you prefer it being an exhibition because it kind of should be?
Well, two things. I agree with you. I like it when it meant something, and I'll tell you why. If you look at the players and talk to the players, they love the concept of winning the game meaning something. Most of these guys, when they're finished and it didn't mean anything, would go back into the locker room and basically get a shower and be ready to get out of town. They didn't hang around. The thing that I think is quirky is there will not be extra innings in an all-star game. It will be decided by a home run derby.
And the batters have already been chosen for that, so you're not
Right.
going to see Alonso or any of these other guys. It's going to be,
Right.
I think Ty France was one of the 3 people listed for the American League,
Right.
but that was a thing.
Why we just let pitchers hit?
I'm trying to think of what league actually used that. Was that the Pioneer League?
Yeah,
Right.
I think so.
Yep.
That like a year or two ago that actually implemented the home run
Right.
derby concept, and I guess the MLB decided it's an all-star game, nobody cares, let's might as well just get it done. It's better than the tie from what,
Right.
18 years ago, 20 years
Right.
ago?
Well, it's also
But-
kind of like hockey's shootout, right? I mean, you're taking your guys and you're giving them a chance to, to win a game. But when we're talking about a home run derby type thing, it's not. They're not going to have batting practice pitchers throwing a ball to them. So it'll be interesting in that regard. So
Yeah, one thing
of course.
The one time I didn't like playing for home field advantage was, of course, 2016 because the American League, of course, won that one. And we had to watch Cleveland with home field advantage in the World Series there, despite, the Cubs winning 103 or 104 games.
The last time I checked, you won. So you got to let it go. You got to let it
I
go.
don't have to let anything go.
Just saying, you won the trophy.
You'll learn when you get older that these things still carry with you. I mean, granted, you haven't been around to see any of the teams that you necessarily like besides the Yankees go through anything because, the Jets haven't been good since Mark Sanchez, and nobody thought they were good then either.
Well, define go through anything because the Jets have been awful. The Yankees have been good, but they've made one World Series in basically 20-something years. I mean, does that count?
One in 20-something. Do you know the last time the Cubs won a World Series before 2016?
1908.
I do. Yeah.
Right.
1908.
Right. Do you know the last time they were in the series before that?
I actually have no idea.
1945.
That's not good.
So it's been a week or two.
It's been a while.
Okay,
I
yeah.
mean,
Hank
you one of
Rowe lost Game 7 to Detroit.
some people can blame Bartman for that. Some people can blame the shortstop for booting 2 easy ground balls. There's a couple ways, it can go around. But
Yeah, well, I like to share. I like to spread the wealth around. I like to blame Bartman and Alex Gonzalez.
yeah, you can. But, just saying. But either way, I thought it was a fun competition last night.
Yeah.
It was entertaining. The All-Star game, I don't plan on watching. I don't know if either of you do, but
Nah.
I've never really been interested in the All-Star game, especially when you want to sell it as a rivalry. And the American League has won, 80% of the time in the last 20 years?
Yeah, they've won quite a few.
So even when the NL wins, it's not exactly a winning streak. They win one, and then they'll lose the next 3. So I'm
Right.
not exactly sold. I know Ohtani's not pitching.
Right.
I guess I'm fine with that because who really cares? I mean, the Angels stink anyway, and Ohtani's going for an MVP, so he's got more important things to worry about.
Mhm.
But any of you got any other All-Star takes, or should we just move on?
Let's move on. I think that it's entertaining, but it's not the passion is not there anymore. They're just
It's kind of
they're
like the NBA All-Star game where defense is optional.
I made a lot of money on that NBA All-Star game, though, taking the second half under because of the new Elam ending. With
I'm not a fan of that either.
But the point is they maximize the amount of points you can possibly
Right.
score in the fourth quarter. So I live bet the second half under, and I made a fortune on it. But either way, I know we were going to talk about some college football.
Yep.
Yesterday we went through the Big Ten. Today we're going to go through the Big 12. But first, we got to talk about one of our sponsors here. We got BetMGM, and they still have a great deal for you for first-time users on the app or website.
Which eliminates you, Rachel, because you're no longer a first-time user unless you come up with a new email address.
No, but when I actually did it the first time, though, I did win, so I did make the most of it.
There you go.
You can get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. All the information is in the show box down below. Check the age limit. Some states allow you to bet when you're 18. Some allow you to do it when you're 21. And, of course, always bet responsibly. But time to segue into college football, and we're going to go through the Big 12. And we got some odds on who's going to actually win the conference. Oklahoma, shockingly, is a favorite. I mean, who would have thought? You have Texas as a surprise number 2 team potentially at plus 230. Then you have Oklahoma State and Baylor at 7-1 apiece. Then TCU and some of the long shots. So, Chris, I'll start with you. You have any thoughts on who you think is going to win the conference? Do you think there's value in Oklahoma? Or do you think with all of the turnover with the coaches, do you just want to stay as far away from them as possible?
Turnover with the coaches, the fact that they're on their way out. Same with Texas in a couple of years. Brent Venables, he's a good defensive coach. But then, like you said, there's a lot of upheaval. Lincoln Riley's gone. Spencer Rattler's gone. Caleb Williams is gone.
Well, Rattler's gone will cause people to bet on Oklahoma. The Caleb Williams one is the one you care about because Rattler was awful.
Yeah, well, Rattler's in Columbia now, so I have to listen to them talk about how Rattler's the best quarterback South Carolina's had since Stephen Garcia, who wasn't good either. But, no, I think Oklahoma State is probably the top option here, like we were talking before the show. Spencer Sanders has to learn not to turn the ball over. 40 turnovers and 32 career starts, 31 picks, 9 fumbles. He's going to have to be better protecting the ball, but I'd take that. I'd take Mike Gundy. I'm a man. I'm 40.
What is he now, like 60?
I'll have to look. I think he's in his 50s.
I think he's probably in his 50s. I think that rant was 2007, I think. So he's probably somewhere.
Yeah, I remember I wrote about it a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Gundy's 54. He'll be 55 next month.
That's what I thought. And I know that you said Stephen Garcia, New York Dragons Arena Football League legend, Stephen Garcia.
Yeah, that's him.
I did see him play once back in the day. But Jim, I'm going to ask you. Do you want to make a case for Oklahoma or Texas, or do you like another potential long shot on the board?
I'm curious to see how Brent Venables is as a head coach, because for many, many years, at least the last 5, Brent Venables has always been on the short list of seemingly every major job out there. And one was concerned, did he actually want to? Because, when you're asked to the dance as many times as Brent has been and you don't take it, there's a concern that maybe you don't really have the passion to be a head coach. Now, clearly, Oklahoma for him is a big thing. So I'm curious about that. I think my personal dark horse, even though there's questions at quarterback, remains Baylor. I do think Baylor's they've got themselves on the right track, and I just like Baylor. I think Oklahoma's going to have problems with their offense, and I don't know that this is the Big 12. Defense is optional, and so we'll have to see how Brent Venables does. But Baylor to me, I think is undervalued.
Can you make a case that Aranda might be either the best coach or the second best coach in the entire conference?
I think he's the best at this point.
You can really make a case for it.
Yeah, he's a better recruiter than anybody in the conference. And it's tough. I'll be honest with you. If you've ever been to Waco and Baylor, it's a beautiful school, but it's tough to get people to get there. You got to if you're recruiting in Texas, trips to A&M, trips to Austin, hell, even trips to TCU. You get SMU. You get a really nice vibe. Baylor's in the middle of bloody nowhere, and
the only place that's worse is UTEP.
That's possible. Now, I will give Chip and Joanna Gaines credit. They did put Baylor on the map, but that's not. I think what he's done at Baylor is amazing, and I think that there were a lot of people who wanted him at different places, but he decided Baylor was where he's going to be, and Baylor's a small school, so. I do think Baylor's undervalued. Now, will they win the conference? I think they have a very good chance of it. I think they're better in Texas.
And just back to your point real quick about Venables not leaving Clemson, living here where Clemson is half an hour away. I think one of the big reasons that Venables never left was look at the teams he faces in the ACC. What ACC offense scares you? Are you scared of Georgia Tech? Are you scared of Syracuse? Are you scared of Pitt? None of those teams are any good. I mean, you had to deal with Wake Forest and North Carolina when the 1 or 2 years in the decade that they're good. But other than that, like you said, the Big 12 is defense is optional. So this is going to be a big change for Venables because now instead of Clemson getting by and winning games 14-10 or 17-10 or whatever, now it's going to be 50-40 every week. And how is he going to adjust to that?
Yeah, for me, I'm personally tossing Oklahoma out. I get the idea of trying to back the team that's been known to dominate this conference in the past, but just because you're a very good coordinator does not mean you're immediately going to hit the ground running as a great head coach. And with all of the turnover, besides just the overall head coach, they have a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator. Caleb Williams left. Dylan Gabriel's the new quarterback. I have never really been a Gabriel fan. He put up a lot of good numbers in a no-huddle, air raid offense, and now he's going to be transitioning over. So I'm not sure if Gabriel is going to experience some growing pains. I'm assuming he will. Kennedy Brooks left as well. So they have an unproven running back core. And you look at the schedule, it's okay. I can't say that it's an easy or difficult schedule. They play Texas, of course, in a neutral, in Dallas, if you count that as a neutral. Play Iowa State on the road, play Baylor at home, play West Virginia on the road, and Oklahoma State at home. I just have too many questions about the actual coaching staff and the unproven pieces. So I feel like they should be a bigger plus price. But Baylor...
On the plus side, though, you can see them being 5-0 by the time they roll in to face Texas in the Red River Shootout.
Oh, you can. And I feel like the point is, even if you like Baylor to win the whole thing, they don't have divisions. So Oklahoma might be the opponent no matter what. I just don't think there's much value on them with so much uncertainty. Baylor was my personal pick at 7-1. I just really like the value involved. The quarterback situation's not great, but they're very experienced on the offensive and defensive lines. They have 4 senior starting offensive linemen who are coming back, and the defensive line's pretty experienced as well. Also, arguably the best special teams in the entire conference, with arguably the best kicker and punter combination, because Dicker, the kicker, left from Texas. The issue with Baylor is they have a pretty difficult schedule. They play at Iowa State, they play Oklahoma State at home, at Oklahoma, and at Texas. That's not great. If I'm gonna be honest.
They do have to go to BYU, too, in September.
Yeah, but I was focusing on the conference games.
Right.
So, I mean, based on that, I think they might lose to BYU, but still, point is that Baylor, I do think, has a difficult schedule, but I do like the experience up front. And we talked about a defense is optional. I can guarantee you that it's not optional for Baylor because Aranda comes from a defensive background, and that was the claim to fame. The Gundy situation was weird last year because Oklahoma State was never a good defensive team, and then last year they randomly became a really good defense and a pretty mediocre offense. Oklahoma State would be my second choice for the value. I am a little bit concerned, though, because Sanders was actually pretty good for most of the year, until the conference title game where he was atrocious and he basically single-handedly costed them the game. Do we think Sanders is going to blow them a game or two? Because I kind of expect it.
Well, I mean, you look at their schedule, they have to go to Baylor. They have to go to – but then their other road games are TCU and Kansas before you get Oklahoma. So, I mean, you get Texas Tech and Texas, then you get Iowa State and West Virginia at home. Their biggest game before you get to Baylor, Arizona State, and we know what Herm Edwards is dealing with out there in Tempe.
That team's going to be a disaster, by the way, Arizona State. We'll get to them later on in the week. They're going to be terrible.
And we talk about all these 6th and 7th year seniors. How about Oklahoma State's punter, Tom Hutton? He's 32.
Nice.
Huh. What's he getting, his 17th degree there? What's
I don't know. He's a 32-year-old Australian.
I'm trying to think of who that was. Was it North Texas who had a backup quarterback who was like 29?
I think so.
Last year?
Actually, yeah. It's been, what was it? Back in when Chris Wenke was at FSU. Yeah. Chris was 25 or 26.
The basketball version is Mitch Lightfoot, who was about 45 when he ended up graduating from Kansas.
Yeah.
Whenever I think of North Texas, I just think of the movie Necessary Roughness, where Scott Bakula comes back to play for the Texas State Armadillos at 35.
Right.
And
He was
Sinbad,
a young 35 though.
and Sinbad is is an offensive lineman.
Yeah, I mean, perfect casting for Sinbad. But since we mentioned some of the teams that we actually like, we've kind of been jumping around it, but we haven't fully discussed it. We got to talk about Texas because they're the second favorites. I know none of us exactly trust Texas. The reason why they're the second favorites is because of obviously reputation,
Right.
B, some experience, and C, their schedule is actually somewhat favorable in terms of home games in conference play.
Right.
They play Bama at home earlier in the year, but of course that's not a conference game. I'm sure they'll get blown out. But
That's a scrimmage.
yeah, it's basically a scrimmage, well, for one team anyway.
Right.
But you have Casey Thompson, who ended up leaving as the starting quarterback, and you have Ohio State transfer Quinn. I'm trying to not butcher the last name here. Is it
Ewers, isn't
Ewers? Is it Ewers?
Ewers, yeah.
It is Ewers. Okay, I want
It
to make sure I
doesn't
didn't
look
butcher
like it doesn't look like that, but that's how you pronounce it.
I wasn't sure if that was the actual pronunciation, but Ewers has taken over the starting job. Of course, he was supposed to be this hotshot prospect going to Ohio State. Never saw the time of day because Stroud was around, and he decided to jump ship. So we don't know if Ewers is actually good.
Is it going to be him, though, or will you see Hudson Card?
I'm assuming you're going to see Ewers because of the upside, but the point is we don't know if he's actually good or not because we saw Rattler, for example, was a huge quarterback prospect. Just because you're a very good prospect doesn't mean you're going to be really good in college, and we've seen a lot of quarterbacks struggle. He transferred because he couldn't beat out Stroud for the job. Now he's trying to see what happens. I don't think he's as bad as Tate Martell, for example, who jumped around to like 4 different schools and never played on UNLV. But I do have questions there. The running back and the receiver groups are good, though, with Robinson at running back and with Worthy at the star wide receiver spot. They also had a top 5 recruiting class. The problem is they're not exactly experienced on defense and special teams, and the offensive line is a little bit weak in terms of depth. So my question for you guys, do you think that Texas can actually get over the hump? Are you going to dare Sarkisian and some of the young guys to kind of exceed expectations? Because I'm kind of in the second option there.
I'm going to have to agree with you, Scott. Look, Texas did everything right. They got NIL money that got them their offensive and defensive lines. Texas, the amount of money that Texas has that they can use, on a per win basis, they just haven't in recent times lived up to expectations. Now, does that mean that they can't? No, it just means that if past is prologue, what exactly do you expect from the Longhorns that they haven't? They've disappointed far more than they've. Hell, it's been all the way back to Vince Young since they've had a team that has been competitive, and then they're about to go into the ACC. Well, that's true. That's fair. That's fair.
Either way, of course, Bama kicked their asses in the title game. But Chris, what about you? Do you have anything you want to add on Texas, or you think that maybe they can actually pull it off?
Free stats. Texas was 99th in scoring defense last year. They mustered only 20 sacks on the defensive side of the ball. They gave up more than 200 yards a game on the ground, 114th out of 130 teams in the country. I don't care how many starters you bring back. When you give up that many points and that many yards, you're not going to beat anybody. Texas is not going to win this conference. They're way overvalued here at plus 230. I'll be surprised if they finish better than a game or so over 500.
I was just going to say, did the defense get their uniforms dirty, or was that optional?
They did, but that was because they were diving for missed tackles.
Okay, they were waving.
There, but
they're fighting to get in line of the Gatorade bucket.
I feel like it's very similar to our discussion with Nebraska. And of course, Texas is further ahead along than Nebraska, but the idea alone is the schedule's favorable. You can make an argument the conference is a bit weak compared to usual years, and in this case, for Nebraska, is the division in the West is relatively weak. But I don't know how many close games you can lose consistently, and me just to not expect Sarkisian to blow 2 games at some point during the schedule, because it's one thing if you want to blow a huge lead in the Red River rivalry, and Oklahoma has a massive comeback. And it's, Oklahoma, you should have won the game, but still, very talented team. Caleb Williams showed up, and he's supposed to be a top 5 pick in the upcoming draft. You lost to Kansas?
And you gave up 57 points.
Yeah, 57 points to Kansas. Like, I don't know how many times Sarkisian blew games late in the year, and we're supposed to just assume that since you have some talent and a favorable schedule, you're not going to find ways to blow games to Oklahoma State, to Oklahoma, and maybe even Iowa State.
I mean, to the point of that, Kansas's highest point total the rest of the season was 33, and that was against Duke.
Yeah.
Well, and you gave up 57 to them.
Normally when they give up 57 points to Texas and Kansas, it's a basketball game.
Yeah,
so much. Not that, but guys, I like your opinion on basically what's going on in the Big 12 right now. The attempts that they're making to expand and pick up the corner schools, as we like to call it in the Pac-12, Arizona State, Colorado, who once was part of the Big 12, return, and Utah, which would make for a bloody, the holy war between Utah and BYU. Do you think it's a wise move, or do you think that conversely, if the Pac-12 were to go ahead and raid the Mountain West for some of their schools, that they could, rival what the Pac-12, what the Big 12 has got?
At this stage, I think it's kill or be killed. It seems like there's just a mad dash to take as many teams as possible.
Right.
And if you're not first, you're last. So I feel like I understand exactly what the Big 12 is doing, because if they don't scoop up these schools, I'm sure the Big 10 might, the ACC might, the SEC might, all these other conferences. It's kind of funny because if you remember like a year or two ago, there was a lot of controversy in Europe over the Super League, where they were trying to merge all the great teams from all the different leagues, and there was a massive backlash for it. And then college football basically saw that idea and said, write that down. Somebody write that down. We need that. And then they just decided to pretty much dissolve every other conference besides 3 huge conferences for the most part, and that's going to be the future of college football especially. So to answer your question, whether or not I actually like this whole 3 conference monopoly they got going on, you kind of have to at least embrace it at this point, because if you don't, you're going to be left behind.
Down here on Sports Talk Radio this morning, they were talking it's going to turn the college football landscape is going to turn into the Big 10, the SEC, and the EEC, which is the everybody else conference. And everybody else is going to try to battle out each other to try and end up with a spot in the playoffs. Because let's face it, if you're not one of those 2 conferences, what's your odds of actually getting into the CFP the way it is right now?
But how far does this trickle down? Do you see a bunch of Group 5 schools potentially group up together to form their own super Group 5 conference? I have no idea.
I mean, you can see Conference USA eat the Sun Belt.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, though, Scott and Chris, Scotty, you made the reference to the English Premier League, okay? And as part of, a group of super teams that will pick it up. I kind of think that what we're coming to in football and college football is kind of a tier between the halves and then what we used to call Division II, right there. So the schools that are in the AAC, the Mountain West, the Sun Belt, pick a conference, I think those schools will eventually break off and become a subdivision of major college, because there's no way, if you're in the AAC, you're getting $7 million. Okay. If you're in the Mountain West, you're getting $4 million. If you're in the ACC, you're making $17 million. Okay. If you're in the Pac, we don't know what, if indeed it's even going to be there any longer. And then the Big 10 is going to be north of 75 million. And the Southeastern Conference is at 68. How, if you're a Clemson, an FSU, a Miami, how are you going to compete against a team that has $30 million to $40 million more in revenue than you do?
Especially since now you can pay players through NIL deals. So that's how I look at it. Eventually, you're going to have to see a bunch of mergers going on in order to compete, which is something that people might not like because it's so much change in college football, and people liked I'd say, I don't use the word integrity, but I think you understand the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I think the counterpoint is, if you wanted the athletes to actually get paid, which I kind of did, I'm trying to think of any other way to do it, because if you're going to pay the athletes, then of course they're going to go where the money is.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, there's that, and
it's a double-edged sword.
Well, we talked about it yesterday. That's what the transfer portal is.
Yeah.
The transfer portal is your free agency.
Rye says the SEC won't take more teams. They're already a full-fledged league. Well, I can guarantee you that if Greg Sankey can keep schools like a Clemson or a Florida State or whatever away from another conference, they'll expand. I mean, look, they already took Texas and Oklahoma. They're not going to be afraid to take anybody else if it'll keep, from adding more power to the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think my counterpoint to that, Rye, would be, why wouldn't they take more teams? Like, you could make the case saying they already have enough. That's probably true, but we've seen in every conference, you don't have to play every other team in your conference. So if you add a couple of teams and you randomly don't play Alabama for 2-3 years at a time because you have enough other teams to fill the void, SEC is going to go where the money is. If they're going to make more money through TV deals or through really any other type of revenue by adding more teams, they're going to do it. Whether or not they should or not, you might end up with 32 teams in a conference, but still, right. I think it's
if you can dodge Alabama and Georgia and Texas A&M or somebody like that for a couple of years in a row, give yourself a better shot at putting together a decent record.
And plus, you're talking about competing for a title. Hell, if the SEC gets more bowl teams in, then who cares? They're making all the money from bowl games. It's not like it really matters. I feel like if you're talking about what's more likely to happen, I think they're more likely to expand than to remain complacent and keep it, in my opinion.
And David says the New Mexico states of the world lose. Well, yeah, schools like that, the UMasses, the few remaining independents that are out there, UConn, who probably never should have come back to football in the first place because obviously they're not very good at it. Those schools, they're going to suffer a little bit, but they're not really benefiting from football now as it is.
This also isn't anything new. We've seen a lot of smaller budget schools have to cut ties with their basketball program or with their baseball program.
Right.
We've seen this happen a lot. It's a bigger deal because football, of course, is football. And
football is a big revenue generator.
That's what I'm saying. Anytime you lose a full football program, it's news because that's usually the biggest moneymaker that an actual program or school has. But having schools cut ties with athletic programs and other sports is quite common, or at least more common than you think.
Yeah, look at UAB a few years ago.
Yeah.
Well, look at Stanford. Okay, Stanford is a blue blood, if you will, of college sports. Many championships in numerous academic situations, and they cut 4 sports over the past through the COVID times because at the time they just couldn't afford them anymore.
Yeah.
They cut 2 men's sports. You got the MAC, okay, which we all love because we love betting in the MAC. The MAC can't what was it?
Kent State.
Kent State, thank you.
Okay.
Kent State cut their baseball team because they couldn't afford it anymore. So the economics are going to suck because right before the University of Maryland joined the Big Ten, when they were with the ACC, they were about to cut 2 or 3 programs, and when they got their deal with the Big Ten, they added 2 programs. So there's a difference between the haves and the have-not. There always will be a difference between the haves and have-not. And does it suck? Yeah, it does. But at the end of the day, it really does economically. And to Scott, to your point on the SEC, will they add teams? They would add a Clemson. They would add a North Carolina. They would add perhaps a Miami.
They wouldn't pick anybody, but if the right team came across, they would.
Right. If they had to get to 20, okay, they would be very selective in how they got there, but they would get there. The thing that the Big Ten faces is they have to take somebody out west. They cannot leave UCLA and USC on an island. That economically makes no sense, and strategically it makes no sense. So whether they like it or don't like it, they're waiting for Notre Dame. Notre Dame wants a $75 million deal with NBC or NBC and somebody else. They're talking right now to the to the Big 12, where they might be able to get a deal where they can get some games that are Notre Dame games, and then some games that are, Big 12 games. So, for that to work, they're going to NBC is going to have to pony up, north of $1 billion to give Notre Dame 75 and to give each one of the teams in the Big 12, for instance, 18 to 20. So that's going to be I can see where, think about cost effectiveness. You got the ACC at $17 million. That's a steal for ESPN. So can they go back, meaning the ACC, go back and renegotiate a contract with ESPN? I don't think they can unless they're adding somebody, and that would be the point that we talked about earlier, Scott, that you mentioned the other day, that perhaps if they could pull Notre Dame in a football way, maybe that could be the way they do it. But at this point in time, the number is simple for Notre Dame. It's 75. If you want Notre Dame, it's going to cost you $75 million.
And I feel like one thing, just kind of the last point I'm going to make about one of David's points about New Mexico State of the world, losing and how it works based on economics. A lot of the reasons why we care about these really, really small schools is because we gamble on the games.
Right.
That's really the only reason why we care. I mean, if you actually look at the attendance of the majority of these smaller schools, what's the attendance like at New Mexico State games? What is it, like 80% empty in the stadium?
Yeah, probably.
So I'm just saying, we care because, of course, we like to fade or back some of these teams, usually fade if they're really, really unknown independent schools. But when we're talking about economics, the tickets are probably $4 and people still don't go to the games. So you're not making money anyway.
Well, I mean, how many times are you going to go to a game and watch a team lose 51-7?
That's the point. So even though we're talking about how it's unfortunate for New Mexico State and some of these other schools to suffer the consequences, how many people are actually going to their games or to be active fans? Not enough.
I mean, just look at UMass last season. Lost to Pitt 51-7. Lost to BC 45-28. Lost to Eastern Michigan 42-28.
You think the Minutemen fans are thrilled to show up on Saturdays for games? Like, of course not. And if you want to make an even bigger case there, if the attendance at these college teams games was the same for like a pro team, they would have contracted like 10 years ago. So you can make a case, but nobody's showing up at the games anyway. So you got to just be honest. We care because we're actually gamblers. We want to see more games. But in reality, a lot of these smaller schools really shouldn't have football programs because nobody's going to their games anyway.
Well, in fairness, if you're in the MAC or if you're in some of these conferences, Patriot League, you get decent attendance. It's just the smaller stadiums.
Yeah.
So you're talking 18,000, 20,000, or in some cases less. At New Mexico State, and I've been there many times, it's a lovely place, but you're going to get more people to go see them play basketball. You're going to go see them play football.
It's like if you want to compare it to the Athletics or Tampa. Like, it doesn't matter how good the team is. If nobody goes, then at some point you're going to realize it's a lost cause. It sounds harsh, and I'm sorry if you're a fan of New Mexico State, but nobody goes to your games. I mean, New Mexico State's known for being, a basketball school?
Yeah.
And even with that, they don't make the tournament that often. They have been on a bit of a run recently, but they're usually a one-and-done team. So, it's kind of just Darwin theory, right? I mean, the strongest survive and the weaker ones end up dying off, and that's what we're going to see.
Unfortunately, but that's the way. I mean, it's been that way for years. It's just a matter of now. It's becoming more. The gap is becoming bigger. That's all.
Yeah, and David's talking about how he went to Missouri State and how he doesn't want to go to games, but he wants to gamble on games. That's the point. I mean, as a gambling show, of course, we want more games and we want more teams.
Right.
Because the more obscure teams you have, the more of an edge you might get because the odds makers might not be paying attention. But if we're talking about what's going to happen with these smaller schools, they're probably going to die because their attendance isn't good enough to survive.
Well, to your point, let me ask you a question, guys. More people are gonna bet on Dartmouth versus Columbia than on Alabama versus Texas A&M.
We're talking about in basketball or football?
I'm talking about in football.
It's not fair to compare them because the Ivy's not technically an FBS conference.
No, I'm just saying, to your point, that it doesn't matter about whether or not the place has 100,000 people and everybody's there, or whether it's an Ivy League school. My point is, go ahead.
The public likes to bet on games that are on TV. It comes really down to the sharp bettors who find an edge in some random injury report if you read the local New Mexican Inquirer.
Right.
You randomly just find some news that you actually want to run with. But to answer your question, more people are going to bet on the TV games, of course. I don't know how many random public square bettors are going to bet on New Mexico State or these random independent or small schools. These are really just sharp bettors, usually, because they're going to look through the TV channels, most of the public, and say, oh, Bama's playing? I'll lay 30 with Bama. I mean, if it's on TV, more public people are going to bet it. So I do think, to answer your question, more sharp bettors would probably bet the Dartmouth game if they find an edge on it. But the public's not even going to know that Dartmouth is even playing.
You're applying the Seinfeld theory where they're talking about, well, why am I watching it? And George goes, because it's on TV?
Yeah. I mean, is the Seinfeld theory wrong? I don't think it's wrong.
No,
it's probably not. But I mean, like you said, a lot of the people that are more in the know are going to more exploit the games that aren't necessarily on TV because, like you said, they can tighten up the lines really, really nicely when it's Alabama, Georgia, as opposed to New Mexico State, UConn.
Yeah. It's also a caveat, though, that the smaller school games, of course, have lower limits than the larger games to try to limit the risk for the sports books. But
true,
most of the bets that I made during the college football show with Steen last year, I mean, we literally took every single over in Presbyterian.
Well,
like the max bet was like $500. Like it was the freest money of the entire college football season. But the most you can put down was like 1,000 on some days maybe to start the year. And in Bama, whether or not you actually like a side or not, you could walk into a casino or a sports book
with a bag
and
of money,
probably lay $300,000.
Right.
Like there's a difference. So I personally like to gamble on the smaller matchups because there's a bigger edge since the odds makers kind of fall asleep at the wheel. But when it comes to comparing the action, you will always get more action in sheer volume on the TV games.
By the way, James, I like the Mountaineers to win more than 5.5 games.
Got to look at their schedule. At Pitt, of course, then Kansas and Towson, at Virginia Tech, at Texas, home against Baylor, at Tech, home against TCU, at Iowa State, then Oklahoma and K-State at home, Oklahoma State on the road. Don't like those last three if I'm West Virginia.
I think you're sweating that out. I think they might be 5-5, and you might need to win like one of your last two. Like I can see something realistic. I think they'll finish 6-6.
Yeah, I think 6-6 might be a high water mark.
It might be.
Gets them to a bowl.
Well, I mean, how many times have we
a win total?
Like 4, 5, and 7 and stuff get into a bowl game?
And that's because they don't have enough. We talked about that with Jack Ely. That's because they don't have enough 6-win teams.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we don't even have to say 6-6 will get you to a bowl anymore. I mean, you can be 4-8 and get to a bowl.
And last year we had the COVID Bowl where Rutgers had the highest GPAs. They were called in to substitute and get their ass kicked in a bowl game.
They got obliterated.
Yeah.
They were against it was a high-scoring offense. Who'd they play? Wake? Did they play Wake?
Where did they play
Wake Forest?
Let's see. I've got my.
I think they played Wake Forest and they lost by like 40.
They lost 38-10 in the Gator Bowl.
That was to Wake, right?
Yep.
Okay. That's what I thought.
They went to the Gator Bowl? Jeez.
Yeah, a last-minute subbing.
Yeah, I mean, a whole bunch of teams bailed out.
And the Pinstripe Bowl got canceled with Boston College. So we'll see what happens with COVID. We're hoping it's behind us, but you never know if 5-7 is good enough for a bowl game or not.
One more James question for the group. West Virginia going to turn the cover team.
So you're looking for them to be a backdoor cover team, basically?
I think they could be. I mean, we talked about at the top of the conference. We don't think it's very good. So if you think that even if West Virginia loses some games, can they keep it close? I think they can, because I think that the differential between the top of the conference and the middle of the conference is not as jarring as it has been in years past.
They're going to be favored at least in 2 games because they play Kansas at home and then they play Towson.
If there's a line on Towson.
That's not what they have for that. Yeah.
But
I'm sure Barstool will have one. They have lines for everything else.
You can find it offshore for a max bet of $200. I'm sure you can find it somewhere. But
any final thoughts, boys, on the Big 12? Any things that we've got a lot of good questions from the class today on the Big 12?
I guess my quick question here, you have 2 teams that are going to be moving on from longtime quarterbacks with Kansas State and Iowa State. Do we think that Iowa State's better without Purdy? Because I've always hated Purdy as a quarterback. I thought he was terrible his entire career, and people just kept trying to sell me on him. I think he got drafted. Was he Mr. Irrelevant?
He was.
He was, yeah.
I can't believe he was drafted. I thought he was atrocious. Like Skylar Thompson had moments; he just always got injured.
Right.
Do we think
Skylar Thompson should be like 45 by now, with as long as he played at Kansas State?
I will give Brock Purdy this. He was better than Will Howard. But do we think Kansas State's going to be better than Iowa State?
That's a tough one. I don't think so.
I'll give Kansas State the slight nod just because of the fact that at least we know Martinez can play quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He may not be the greatest quarterback, but he's mobile and he fits into that K-State system with the way Kleiman wants to do things. Iowa State, I don't know jack squat about Hunter Deckers.
Yeah, if you want a long shot in one game this season, whenever Iowa State plays Oklahoma, I mean
October 27th.
I was going to say, isn't that the official move? Especially with a weaker Oklahoma team, Iowa State has a mediocre season. They somehow sneak up on Oklahoma, and that's kind of it.
Usually,
that's the Matt Campbell special.
There you go.
There you go.
And James said that West Virginia opens against Penn.
Pitt.
So
Pitt. They play Pitt, the backyard brawl.
Oh, well, the backyard brawl is great, but James had said Penn here.
Yeah, he keeps messing that up.
Oh, okay. There's a big difference between Pitt and Penn. Purdy and Rodriguez are overrated, says Rye.
I'm not sure if Rodriguez is overrated, but Purdy definitely is because he somehow got drafted. I mean, there was a video from last year of him getting tackled. I think it was by TCU, and he threw the ball backwards 20 yards. Trying to avoid
Rodriguez, I'm guessing Rye means Martinez.
I think he means Martinez. Martinez isn't overrated because everyone thinks that he sucks.
Right.
Like, he might have been overrated when he started, but now the stock is so low that you can argue he might even be underrated at this point. But Purdy was – I remember Steen tried to make a case last year of him being like a dark horse, like Heisman candidate, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, Purdy's awful. He's really, really bad. Like, I at least that's what I saw when I watched him play. But
he did have some good targets to throw to, but I mean,
that's the point. He wasn't good with good targets, and he had arguably the best running back in all of college football last year.
Right.
And yet he still didn't really do much. But we'll see. I still don't exactly expect a serious long shot, a 10-1 or higher to win this conference like Baylor was last year. But I like the value on Baylor and Oklahoma State.
Yeah. That's basically where I think it's going to come out of those two. I don't think Texas and Oklahoma are going to be there.
Yeah,
no,
I agree.
I would definitely agree with that, boys.
All right, cool.
So we'll put to bed the Big 12.
Yep.
Darn, we didn't even get to talk about how bad Texas Tech is.
I don't know if we really needed to, but
they're bad.
I was going to say they're bad. The end. Credits roll.
If it weren't for Kansas, they would be the worst team in the league. So there's that.
Dykes gets to try and take over TCU. That's going to be an interesting thing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But no, this is one of the, like Scott said, there's not a lot of difference from the top of this league and the bottom of this league. But stands Kansas, of course.
Yeah, well, Kansas, if they win 4 games, they're going to have a parade. But still,
Texas Tech.
How they had a parade for almost beating Oklahoma, and then they had the actual parade when they beat Texas. But
still, you got a lot of guys coming back this year.
Yeah, they do. I mean, that's the old quote from Jim Belvana. It's like he's at Bucknell, and it's like, yeah, we went like 1-20 something last year, and he complained to the athletic director, and he said, yeah, but you're forgetting one thing. He said, what? He's like, we got everybody back from that team. So they're experienced.
Right. There you go.
But either way, I forgot what conference we're going to do tomorrow. But we're going to do something. So stay tuned for that for college football.
Yeah, something. There you go.
We got ACC and SEC, so whatever you guys want.
Let's do the ACC. We'll go alphabetical.
We'll go off the.
Out of those
we're really going to talk about the ACC. We're going to talk about Clemson and a whole bunch of teams that aren't very good. And
we can talk about Cristobal and how for some reason recruits actually want to go to him even though he can't coach.
So yeah, well, they paid him enough money to go there.
That is true because he can recruit. But either way, you can find me on Twitter at Rice Show Radio. Where can everybody else find you guys?
Same place where they've been able to find me for the last 8 months.
I'm giving you a plug, man. You got to take the opportunity. There's an outlet there. You got to plug it in.
Yeah.
My plug's broken.
Yeah.
No,
It's Bet Royalty.
Betting Royalty is my Twitter.
And I'm JW Media DC on Twitter. So there you go.
Cool.
And the good news is, can we talk about the Sun Belt? We'll tell you what. We'll talk. We'll try to factor in some of the AAC and some of the other little conferences on Friday so that we get everybody.
Oh, great! Now you're insulting people that like the Sun Belt. They're calling them a little conference.
I was gonna say we're gonna focus on the main ones, especially with no baseball right now. But of course, when the parlays actually return, when the second half of baseball season starts,
on
we'll
Thursday.
see what we can cram in there.
Right.
So we'll put it that way. But
we can always make room.
Yeah, I think it's time to wrap up though.
Yes, sir.
So thanks everybody for stopping
Thank
by
you.
for Just Parlays. We'll be back once again tomorrow. And until then, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye.